Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started, and maybe we'll have some more people join us, but I want to make sure we get you all out of here on time. So, hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Hawkins. I use she and they pronouns. I'm the Associate Director of Leadership and Service at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo. And we're the office that oversees clubs and organizations, which includes club sports. And so I know that you've all been shared the information that most of the teams at Solano are disbanding and leaving the NAIA at the end of this school year. And so I wanted to share with you all today and give you a chance to answer questions or ask questions about the future of your teams and how we want to welcome you into our club sports family. So what we're going to talk about today, we're going to go over the ABCs of club sports, some of the lingo that you'll hear a lot. We're going to talk about the process for getting your team recognized as a club and what that means. That includes the annual registration process that every club has to go through, what requirements will need to be in place before the team can get started, some tips and tricks for managing your club, and then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. You're welcome to drop things in the chat as questions, or you're welcome to interrupt me as well, and then we'll have time for Q&A at the end too. So let's first talk about the ABCs of club sports. Excuse me. Club sports are part of the CSU club program, and clubs for the CSU are officially known as Recognized Student Organizations, or RSOs, but really we just refer to these as clubs. This is governed by CSU Executive Order 1068. And basically, it says that this is a group of students that want to be recognized by the university, and they get certain rights and access to certain things as a result of being recognized by the university, but they're not affiliated with the university. So they're not official university programs. We'll use those terms RSO and club interchangeably, but just so you know, when you see those terms, they mean the same thing essentially. The key thing is that clubs are student run and student managed. So while you'll always have staff support from our office, the students are going to be running the team just like they do here at Cal Poly. One site you're going to want to get to know really well is Cal Poly Now, now.calpoly.edu. This is your go-to guide to student life on our campus, and it's going to expand to include your campus next year as well. And this is where you'll find all of our current clubs. You'll also be able to filter by club sports, and we'll be adding a Solano specific filter as well once your teams get added. But this is where you're going to not only advertise your club to incoming and current students, but it's where you'll be able to manage all aspects of your club as well. As I mentioned, club sports are officially recognized by the CSU, and they operate under slightly different guidelines than regular clubs do. So they still get all the same rights and access as club sports, but they get a lot more, as regular clubs. They get a lot more in exchange for being a club sport too, but there are more requirements placed on the team. And this is just because of the risky nature of our athletic activities, whether it be competition, practices, travel. So we'll go into what some of those requirements are. But I can guarantee you, after having worked in higher ed and with club sports for 20 years now, that the extra requirements that we place on club sports are well worth the payoff for what you'll get in exchange. And then finally, another term you'll hear us use a lot is NGB, or National Governing Body. And this is the organization that governs your sport and that you'll use to determine your eligibility for your players, who your teams that you're going to be competing against, what's your league or championship standoffs, standings, etc. So I've posted the list of governing bodies that our current club sports teams all use for the same sports that you all have. So feel free to reach out to these organizations if you're not already familiar with them and get connected. Find out what you will need to do on their end to become recognized as a club sport team through them first, because that is definitely the first step. So now that we've gone over the ABCs, I want to also tell you about the 3 departments that exist on our campus to support clubs. And as we figure out staffing at the Solano campus, we'll be able to expand on this. But for now, here's who's available to support you in San Luis Obispo. First is we have 2 departments within ASI. Our ASI, which is Associated Students Incorporated, is a little different from the ASCAM, CSM at Solano. Yours is not incorporated as a standalone organization, whereas ours is. So they're an entirely separate company, if you like to think of it in that terms, from the state, which is what you runs the university, but we contract with them to provide certain services to our clubs because of the number of clubs we have. As of this morning, we have 435 active clubs on our San Luis campus, which includes 30 club sports teams. So we have a very high volume of activity, and we look forward to welcoming you into that family of resources and other teams. ASI Club Services is the first department, and they support all things finance related for clubs. So, any banking, when you need to make deposits into your club account, they handle that. If you need to spend money, that's done through purchase requests. If you're applying for money from other sources, that would be a budget request. So, they oversee all of those processes. Then we also have ASI Facility Scheduling, and they're the organization that manages our on-campus space reservations. We still need to figure out how that's going to work with the Solano campus. There's a lot of stuff that's still in the air, but we're going to figure it out. Yeah, Joaquin, I see your hand raised. You can go ahead and unmute.
Hi, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good, thank you. So I was wondering what kind of expenses the student body would cover.
So right now, I can only tell you what our current clubs do. I know that AS is still working on figuring it out how we're going to incorporate the new Solano clubs into the structure. But right now, our club sports teams are eligible to apply for funding within our club sports pool of money. That money pays for things that apply to the whole club sports program, like our student assistance and our awards at the end of the year. But teams are able to get their individual budgets, portions of their individual budgets from there as well. On average, the funding covers about 8 to 10% of the club budget for the year. And so the rest of those expenses are going to come from things like player dues, fundraising, sponsorships, things like that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. The third department is actually the one that I run, which is clubs and organizations. And so most of your processes are going to come through us. That's going to be the first step, which is petitioning to start this club, the annual registration process, which includes the officer training, and looking at all of your events for risk assessment. And we'll go into all of this further in detail once we get you onboarded as a club. But let's start with that first. Let's look at what you need to do to create this club in the first place. So this process is open right now, and I know that both men's and women's water polo have already submitted their petition. So congrats, that's awesome. The first step is the petition for recognition. So you'll need to designate a prospective president and 4 additional students who want to submit the petition for status as an RSO, that term I used earlier, AKA club. This petition's available on our website, and I'm happy to send out a follow-up email after today's session if you all want to put your email addresses in the chat box. I can make sure to just link you this whole presentation. The petition will then get routed by Adobe Sign for signatures because we have to show that all 5 students are submitting that petition together. Then we're going to look to make sure that the prospective president must meet the criteria to be an officer, which is also defined by Executive Order 1068. And I'm going to go into those requirements in just a second. And then each of the 4 additional petitioners just needs to be enrolled in at least 1 unit. So we do check to make sure they're enrolled, but the requirements are much lower. Once that petition is submitted, then you're also going to submit the bylaw builder via Cal Poly Now. And the bylaws, or constitution as they're sometimes called, are the governing documents for how you're going to manage your clubs. What are the officers going to be? Who manages the elections and where do you hold the elections? What time of year do you do those elections? Things like that. Yeah, Joaquin.
Hi. So when submitting the bylaws, they got sent to the other Cal Maritime students to be approved, but they needed Cal Poly emails. So would we have to resubmit the bylaws without including them for it to actually reach the AS people over at Cal Poly?
That's a great question. So your AS people are not going to review them. Neither are the other people with maritime addresses on the bylaws. So let's talk about these 2 things separately. The petition is submitted in Microsoft Forms, and then I'm going to route that for signature via Adobe Sign since I can't capture everyone's signatures in Microsoft Forms. The bylaws only need to be submitted by the president. They don't need to be reviewed by anyone else but the advisor. And we don't have your advisor hired yet. So once they're hired, then they'll have access and then they'll be able to vote on the bylaws. But I'm just serving as your temporary advisor until that happens.
Okay, so mm, is that something that we need to worry about right now then, or
No,
can
no,
we
you've
push
submitted
that
them
forward?
correctly. You added the extra people, but it's fine. I can just take them off. It doesn't slow anything down.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks so much.
Yeah, no problem. There is no deadline to submit this petition. So if you're not ready to jump into this process yet, don't worry. But the sooner you start the process, the sooner your team will be recognized. I'm assuming because men's and water polo start in the fall with their seasons, that's why they wanted to get these petitions done sooner. And that's a great plan. We are happy to work with you through the rest of this term before you go on to summer break. We do work full time around the year. So if you are available, we can work with you over the summer too. But I know a lot of you will be on summer cruise. But no worries. Whenever you're ready to start this process and work on it, we're here for you.
I have one more quick question,
Yeah, go
sorry.
for it.
So there was no place in the club application to submit our affiliation agreement to the CWPA. So who would we send that to?
Correct. You're going to email that to me and I'll follow up with those instructions. There's a weird thing in Microsoft Forms because we don't have the same email addresses that I can't allow you to add attachments. So I'm going to have to handle that offline. So yeah, I will be following up on that.
Okay, so do you want us to send that over to you after this meeting
Yeah,
then?
yeah. If you have it and you're ready to, go for it. In fact, I
Wonderful.
will put my email address here in the chat for you all as well too.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So once this petition for recognition is approved, the next step is that the club is going to register for the current school year, which right now we're already registering for 25-26. Registration requires that you have a few more things ready to go. You're going to need to identify not just your president, who you've already identified as your petitioner, but you're going to need a treasurer as well, someone that's in charge of the money. Those are the two required officer positions. You're also welcome to have a co-president if you like, but that is completely optional. They do have to meet the eligibility requirement if you have one. So sometimes it makes more sense to have them serve in another role like vice president or secretary that doesn't have the same eligibility requirements as the president and treasurer do. You're also going to need an advisor. Like I said, that's going to be assigned to you once we get the new club sports coordinator hired for the Solano campus. But for now, it's going to be me. And I'll be working with the whole team across both campuses to set you up for success. This is also going to be a chance for you to provide general information about the club, things that will be listed in your in our club directory that's we're going to set up for you, including any website and social media links if you have any. Contact information, remember this is public contact information, so you don't want to include like your home address. This is where you might want to put, like if you have a team email address, for example. If you have a profile picture or a profile logo, we'd love to include that. And then you're also going to have to submit a roster of at least 5 members. That's what the CSU requires, but I know many of your leagues require more than that to field a team. So I'm not so worried that you all will have the minimum numbers. I think you'll all meet that just fine. This process, so let me go back just 1 second. This petition for recognition, this is a one-time process. That this happens the first time that you're trying to get status as a club. The annual registration process is just that, it's annual. So this will happen every year. But starting next year, so for when we go into 26-27 registration, that's when you'll all be Cal Poly students by then. You'll all be able to follow the same processes as us because you'll be in our system. But for this year, we're going to do it all in Microsoft Forms to keep it really simple. I mentioned earlier that I would talk about officer eligibility, so let's do that now. So the president, treasurer, and optional co-president must meet the eligibility criteria from Executive Order 1068. And you're welcome to go read that whole thing if you like, but here's a good summary of it for you. The officers must be matriculated at a CSU campus. So this means they need to be enrolled as a regular student. They can't be enrolled through Open University or Extended Ed or any program like that. They need to be maintaining a minimum campus term grade point average of 2.0. They need to be in good standing, not on academic, disciplinary, or administrative probation. And they must be enrolled in a minimum of 6 semester units if you're an undergraduate students or 3 units for graduate students. So every term, we check all of these eligibility requirements to make sure that our officers still meet these requirements. So it is really important. And then the last thing that you'll need to do to register the club is the president, treasurer, and again, co-president, if you have one, will complete the officer training for 25, 26. And this is also already available on Cal Poly now. Once we're able to put all this information together, you've submitted your registration, we've confirmed everyone's eligibility, and the officer training is complete. That's when the club will be considered active status. And that's when you can start making reservations. We'll set up your bank account for you. You can start collecting dues, things like that. But as I mentioned before, the CSU does have specific requirements for club sports. And so there are a few more things that need to be in place before the team can start with any physical activity, basically before your first practice can happen. So we've got your registration. We'll make sure that you're approved by then. Another thing that you'll need to find out from your national governing body is if a coach is required, and if so, what the requirements for those coaches are. For example, USA Rugby, I know for sure, has coaching requirements, and they have minimum qualifications that their coaches have to be in order for them to serve as coaches. But for example, CWPA for water polo, I'm pretty confident that they do not have a coach requirement. So if you don't have a coach and you're not going to be using a coach, that's no problem. You can also use student coaches. So there are a couple different options for you, but it's really going to depend on your national governing body. And I recommend doing that research as soon as possible. And then you'll also need to have a minimum of 2 safety officers. And these are students on the team that are CPR, first aid, and AED certified, and also go through a little bit of extra training asynchronously to become safety officers. Yeah, Joaquin.
For the coach, sorry about any background noise. Do we have to, if so, since the CWP is required one, do we then have to go through any channels with you to make sure that he's approved?
Yes, I'm going to go to that in just a second.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great question. First, let's talk though about player requirements. So there is a participation agreement that every player will have to sign. This is where we can collect some information about you, like your emergency contacts and things like that, in case something happens while you're traveling. We need to get a hold of a guardian or someone to let them know what's going on, or if you're injured. It's also we're going to have you agree to a player code of conduct. So every player has to submit one of these participation agreements. If you're a team that has cuts, I don't recommend having everyone sign a participation agreement just to come to tryouts because they might not make the team. So we don't need all that information from them. If that's the case, we can provide a one-time waiver for them to use during tryouts, just a paper waiver that they would sign. And then you're all good. And then once you set your roster and you know who's on the team, that's when they would do their participation agreement. If the player is already trained in first aid, CPR, AED, they can apply to be a safety officer. And we'll go over how to do that at a later date. But it'll be through Cal Poly now. And then also, if they have a personal vehicle and they're willing to drive for team activities, they should also apply to become an approved driver. And we'll have that process set up over the summer. So that's one thing that's going to be really different going from NAIA and athletics level to club sports is any kind of travel arrangements that may have been made for you in the past and arranged or even paid for by the athletics department, the team's going to have to take over responsibility for those. So you'll be making your own hotel arrangements, making your own travel arrangements. Most of our teams use personal vehicles for the cost savings. But we do have a few that charge high number amount of dues so that they can afford charter buses. So it's really up to the team how bougie you want to be, basically. And then if you're going to have a coach or if a coach is required, there is a coach approval process. All coaches from the university perspective are volunteers, but you can choose to pay your coach if you want. This is just another expense that the team will have to take on. And there are a few things that the coach will have to complete prior to their first day of practice. They'll do an orientation with the club sports coordinator. They're going to sign a coaching agreement for the year, which basically is kind of a no fault agreement, basically saying that they can step away from coaching if they feel like it, and then also that we have the right to let them go if they're not meeting the terms of the agreement. They need to be first aid, CPR, AED trained, even if they're not going to be safety officer of the team, but all coaches must have this training. They're going to sign up as an official volunteer through the university. They're going to sign a waiver of liability. If they're going to be driving for team activities, they'll do driver paperwork. Um, If they are going to be paid, that's when we would sign a contract with them, which would lay out the payment terms. And then they also need to meet the NGB requirements, as I mentioned. So I know, for example, USA Rugby, they have to be to coach club at the collegiate level. They have to be like at least a level two coach. They have to do some safe sport training there. And so basically, we want to find out from the NGB what those requirements are, if there are any, and that the coach meets those requirements. So I know it seems like a lot, but our staff is used to doing this with 30 teams a year. So we are really comfortable with these requirements and help walk you through these. Now, all of that's been put together. You've petitioned, we've recognized you as a club. You've registered for the school year. You've got your participation agreements on file. You've got your safety officers. If you have a coach, you've got them all signed up. Now you're ready to go. And so I want you to just get a glimpse of all the resources that we have available for you to support your club. These are going to be things you're going to want to bookmark to dive into later because it might be a little overwhelming right now. But the first I want to tell you about is your go-to guide to club management. This is available on Cal Poly Now. It's a link on every single page. And this is where we have a lot of different guides. Think of them as FAQs. There's some for event planning, there's some for all the different finance things you will need, and a lot more. So these are available for you to check out anytime. We also have our own page on Cal Poly Now for our office, and this is where you can find both digital and downloadable forms, the RSO handbook, which is like 57 pages of really in-depth information, and other general resources to help you manage your club, things like receipt templates and invoice templates and things like that. And then we also have our full website, which is clubs.calpoly.edu. And this is where you'll find really detailed information. It's kind of like a website version of the RSO handbook. But this is where you'd go if you needed to find more information about insurance, having food at club events, and more. We'll also go over all of this again when we do your new club orientation after your petition is successful. But I wanted you to know to make sure you all knew that we have a lot of resources. You're not alone in doing this, and our staff is here to walk you through this, and we're available all the time. So I think it's perfect that my Q&A page has a water polo player on it since that's who's here today. So hopefully you all have some questions for me that I would love to answer at this time.